All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're looking at the absolutely groundbreaking work of a 14th century scholar named Ibn Khaldun. Long before anyone was talking about modern sociology or economics or applying the scientific method to historical analysis, this man sat down in the 1300s and literally rewrote the rules of how we study human civilization. He didn't just care about what happened, he was obsessed with finding out exactly why it happened.
So think about how history was taught to you back in school. Was it just this exhausting, endless list of kings, battles, and random years you had to memorize? For centuries, that was exactly how history was recorded. It was just a collection of stories. But Ibn Khaldun stepped in and argued that if we're only looking at that surface-level stuff, we are completely missing the actual science of human existence.
And this is absolutely crucial. He didn't see history as mere gossip. He demanded it be treated as a rigorous branch of philosophy. He actually used the Arabic term hikmah, meaning wisdom or philosophy. He believed that tucked underneath all those entertaining tales of the past is a deep, highly complex web of causes and origins. To him, history was the study of the fundamental laws governing human societies. So if you aren't digging for the how and the why, you simply aren't doing history right.
To unpack this brilliant mind, we're going to follow a logical path. First, the flaws of past historians. Second, history as true philosophy. Third, mapping the inhabited Earth. Fourth, the 7 climatic zones. And finally, how geography shapes civilization.
Section 1. Flaws of past historians. The problem with blind imitation.
So Ibn Khaldun acted as the ultimate intellectual myth-buster of his time. He was reading the old guard, famous historians like al-Masudi, al-Waqidi, and Ibn Ishaq, and frankly, he wasn't impressed. His biggest issue? Blind imitation. They were basically just copy-pasting older texts without stopping to verify if those events were even physically possible. They treated crazy myths, local gossip, and wildly exaggerated numbers as absolute fact. He reminded everyone that without a critical filter, without testing these stories against actual physical laws, history just devolves into a bunch of baseless rumors.
Which brings us to Section 2. History as true philosophy, the paradigm shift.
To fix history, he realized he had to build an entirely new framework. So he split historical analysis into 2 totally distinct levels, the Zahar and the Batin. The Zahar is that superficial outer shell, the mere facts, the dates, the entertaining stories. It's just surface-level reporting. But the Batin? That is the hidden, scientific inner truth we actually need to uncover. It's the root causes, the hidden mechanics, and the massive societal and environmental forces at play. By shifting our focus to the Batin, history transforms from just a simple timeline of events into a really rigorous philosophical science.
All right, Section 3, Mapping the Inhabited Earth. Geography as Destiny.
So how exactly do we find this inner truth? Well, Ibn Khaldun said we have to look at the actual dirt under our feet. He anchored his whole historical analysis in a concept called al-Rub al-Ma'mur, which translates to the inhabited quarter. Because logically, you can't understand human behavior without understanding where humans can physically stay alive. In his view, the vast majority of the Earth was just completely inhospitable. True, complex civilization could only ever develop in this specific, geographically viable quarter of the globe.
What's wild is how he figured out the differences between the hemispheres based purely on natural observation. He pointed out that the northern hemisphere was super densely populated because of its temperate weather and balanced sunlight, which is basically the perfect recipe for complex societies. On the flip side, the deep southern hemisphere was largely empty of that kind of dense civilization. Why? Because the extreme heat and incredibly harsh sunlight made it super hostile to large-scale development. The environment was literally deciding where great societies could begin to form.
Let's zoom in a bit for Section 4, the 7 climatic zones, also known as al-Aqlim al-Sab'iyah. To really nail this theory down, he adopted a mapping system that sliced this inhabited quarter into a precise grid of 7 distinct bands, moving from the blistering heat of the equator all the way up to the freezing north completely dictates the ceiling of a society's advancement. Zones 1 and 2 at the equator and zones 6 and 7 in the far north are pounded by extreme weather. That results in pretty sparse settlement. But right there in the sweet spot sit zones 3, 4, and 5. These middle latitudes are temperate and balanced, and according to him, this is exactly where your dense, highly advanced civilizations are born.
Which leads us to our final stop, Section 5, How Geography Shapes Civilization, Climate, Culture, and Characteristics.
This is where it all comes together. Because survival is so much easier in that temperate middle, zones 3, 4, and 5, humans actually have the bandwidth to build massive empires, invent complex crafts, and establish profound religious philosophies. I mean, the moderate climate means people aren't spending every waking second just trying not to freeze or overheat. This surplus of time leads to balanced temperaments, the development of advanced sciences, and remarkably, he points out that this zone is historically the birthplace of major prophetic missions. The environment gives him the stability required for higher-level thinking.
But contrast that with the extremes. In zones 1, 2, 6, and 7, geography traps humanity in a constant state of physical survival. You just don't have the luxury of developing grand architecture or organized universities when you're battling the elements daily. He also noted that these extreme climates cause specific physical adaptations in humans, like variations in skin color. Plus, these populations were usually geographically isolated by massive oceans, sweeping deserts, or towering mountains. He even meticulously mapped how major rivers, mountain ranges, and the specific geography of the Islamic world fundamentally shaped trade routes, the flow of armies, and the rise and fall of great dynasties. Geography was either the ultimate barrier or the ultimate highway.
So the big takeaway here, the absolute crucial point from Ibn Khaldun, is that nature and geography are the true ghostwriters of the human story. History isn't just a sequence of random decisions made by kings. It's the inevitable result of human beings interacting with the unyielding forces of their environment. When we finally grasp the batin, that inner mechanics of climate, geography, and societal pressure, we actually unlock the real science of our past.
Which leaves us with a pretty massive question to ponder today. Even with all of our modern technology, global trade, and the internet, how much of our lives, our politics, and our economies are still completely dictated by the climate zone we happen to call home? It is a fascinating lens to view our modern world through, and it's all thanks to a brilliant scholar from the 14th century. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and always keep questioning the why behind the history you read.